Friends of Islam, this time the Islamic faith is back before you to share Islamic information. I hope it inspires your activities today, and don't forget to click the subscribe button and activate the bell button notifications so you don't miss the latest news from the Islamic faith channel. Islam is now rapidly growing in China, especially following the discovery of the Prophet Zulkifli's tomb near the Great Wall of China. The development of Islam in China is currently showing quite rapid growth, despite the country being known for its strict policies on religious practice. Despite the pressures and challenges, more and more Chinese people are becoming interested in learning more about Islam. This phenomenon has attracted widespread attention, especially following the discovery of what is believed to be the Prophet Zulkifli's tomb near the Great Wall of China. The discovery of the tomb has garnered widespread attention, sparking public curiosity and interest in the history of the prophets, who apparently have traces of their roots in China. Many people who were previously unfamiliar with Islam have begun to open up, study its teachings, and some have even decided to embrace the religion after seeing its values align with the principles they seek. Some historians and researchers believe that Prophet Zulkifli, known as a patient and devout prophet, has historical ties to East Asia. Some theories suggest that he preached as far east as the Far East, and the discovery of this tomb is considered to support this theory. The tomb is not only a popular pilgrimage site, but also a starting point for awareness of Islamic history in China. Many are beginning to explore the deeper roots of Islam in the country, from the Tang dynasty, known for its hospitality to Muslims, to the Hui and Uyghur communities, which have long been an important part of Islamic history in China. This development is also supported by the growing interest of China's younger generation in spiritual studies and Islamic moral values. Many of them are inspired by the stories of the prophets, including the Prophet Zulkifli, in navigating the fast-paced and stressful modern life. Although still facing many challenges, the current resurgence of interest in Islam in China is a phenomenon that cannot be ignored. And who would have thought it all stemmed from a quiet tomb that holds a profound history behind it? This phenomenon reminds us that guidance can come from unexpected directions. In a country once known for the spread of Eastern philosophy and Confucianism, the light of Islam is now beginning to shine again, quietly but surely. As Allah says in the Quran, "When there comes to you the help of Allah and the victory, and you see people entering the religion of Allah in multitudes, then glorify the praises of your Lord and ask His forgiveness. Indeed, He is the one who accepts repentance." Surah An-Nasr 1-3. Is this a sign of a spiritual revival in China? God knows best. But one thing is certain, Islam is a religion of truth, and truth can never be hidden forever. Even behind the greatest walls, light will always find its way. The discovery of the tomb believed to be the resting place of the Prophet Zulkifli within the Great Wall of China has had a tremendous impact. Shortly after the news spread, a wave of interest in Islam began to emerge from various parts of China. People who were previously unfamiliar with Islam are now starting to read, research, and even attend study groups about the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Some of them are touched and find peace in Islamic teachings, even to the point of voluntarily converting. This phenomenon is not unusual. In just a few months, hundreds to thousands of people in various regions have declared their conversion to Islam, both secretly and openly. They come from various backgrounds: scientists, teachers, farmers, students, and even local officials. Amazingly, many of them say that the discovery of the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli touched their hearts spiritually. They feel that Islam is not just a foreign religion, but rather part of the history and heritage long buried in their own homeland. Some say that the peaceful face of the Prophet Zulkifli, immortalized in the ancient carvings and reliefs around the tomb, creates a powerful impression, as if conveying the message that Islam is a religion of mercy and compassion, not violence, as they had previously misunderstood. This phenomenon serves as a warning to the world. Islam will continue to thrive, even in the most unlikely places. And when the truth emerges, no wall, no matter how thick, can block Allah's guidance. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "There will always be a group from my ummah who will stand up for the truth. They will not be harmed by those who abandon them or oppose them, until Allah's decree comes and they remain as they are. Hadith narrated by Muslim. Today, China is no longer just an industrial and technological nation, but is also becoming a new breeding ground for the growth of faith in Islam. Interestingly, many convert to Islam not because they are invited or forced, but because their hearts are moved. They witness that Islam is a religion that brings peace, cleanliness, discipline, and sincerity. Its teachings of monotheism, social justice, and noble morals are values they long for amidst the materialistic nature of modern life. During a private visit, Xi Jinping reportedly stood directly in front of the tomb. He observed the ancient carvings and relics around the tomb, read the historical records left behind, and listened to explanations from archaeologists and historians about the Prophet Zulkifli. Surprisingly, according to internal reports, Xi Jinping was seen silently and thoughtfully for a long time in front of the tomb. In a whisper to his staff, he reportedly said, "This is not just an ordinary tomb. This is the resting place of a prophet, a messenger of God." Xi Jinping was shocked to hear the news of the discovery of the Prophet Zulkifli's tomb near the Great Wall of China. It was a discovery that opened his eyes to a spiritual depth he had never before suspected. Seeing the rapid conversion of Chinese people to Islam following the discovery touched his heart. Now he is even reportedly planning a major event, an open-air religious study in front of the tomb. This event is planned to invite Muslims from all over the world to celebrate the values of peace and knowledge that come through this religion. In recent years, a team of archaeologists from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences has been conducting regular excavations around the Great Wall, specifically in the still unexplored southwest region. This location is quite remote, surrounded by barren hills and narrow paths believed to have been used only by imperial guards during the Han Dynasty. No one would have guessed that beneath the seemingly ordinary ancient stones and small ruins, something truly extraordinary lurks. As the excavation entered its 7th week, researchers discovered a rectangular stone structure embedded deep in the ground. Initially, they thought it was just an ordinary ancient coffin or the remains of a building used to store ancient military weapons. However, when the large stone on top was successfully removed with the help of heavy equipment, everyone on site fell silent. Beneath the mound of earth was revealed a small chamber that had been sealed for centuries. Inside lay an ancient teak coffin, still intact. The coffin was engraved with inscriptions that most of the archaeological team didn't recognize. What added to the suspense was the presence of a white cloth neatly covering the top of the tomb. The cloth was inscribed with strange symbols that didn't match ancient Chinese symbols. Upon closer inspection, one of the senior archaeologists, Professor Lin, frowned, then raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He realized that the letters on the side of the coffin resembled ancient Arabic script, specifically Kufic. This discovery was considered implausible, as official Chinese historical records never recorded any deep interaction between Islamic civilization and the area around the Great Wall during that period. However, this discovery was indeed real, and therefore it deserved further careful investigation. News of this strange discovery reached Beijing within days. President Xi Jinping, known for his meticulous attention to national history and culture, immediately requested an official report from the Academy. Initially, he dismissed it as a simple archaeological report. However, upon seeing the drawings of the tomb and the carvings on the wooden coffin, his interest turned into serious curiosity. Xi Jinping immediately ordered the site to be strictly guarded. He did not want any information leaked to the public until he was certain about the discovery. He also requested that historians from various fields be brought together, including translators of classical Arabic and archaeologists from abroad. A multidisciplinary team was secretly formed with one primary task: to uncover who was buried there. For several weeks, experts labored to translate the inscriptions carved into the coffin and walls of the small room. Finally, a section was successfully deciphered, leaving everyone present speechless with shock. It was clearly written in classical Arabic, Qabru Zulkifli Nabiyullah, which means, "This is the tomb of Zulkifli, prophet of God." This news brought a moment of silence to the research room. No one could have imagined that behind those seemingly simple ancient stones lay the tomb of a prophet revered in 3 major world religions. No one dared to jump to conclusions, but the physical evidence undeniably solidified. The inscriptions were not haphazardly made. The wood and ink used indicated their age, and the writing style was consistent with the era of the prophets known in Islamic tradition. President Xi Jinping finally received the complete report from the research team. He read it over and over again, his expression unreadable. There was no laughter, no lengthy comments, only deep silence. However, shortly thereafter, he requested that he be scheduled to visit the tomb in person, with the caveat that no media or public information be known. Xi Jinping's journey to the site was discreet. He was accompanied only by a few special guards and a key researcher. Upon arrival, the atmosphere was completely silent. There was no sound other than the wind gently blowing through the small trees growing wildly around the hill. Xi Jinping dismounted, wearing a thick jacket and a simple hat. He walked slowly toward the tomb, his steps calm but solemn. When he finally stood directly in front of the tomb, Xi Jinping seemed to stare at it for a long time. His face was calm, but it was clear that something was stirring within him. There was a mixture of awe and confusion on his face. He didn't fully understand what he was seeing, but he could sense that this was no ordinary place. There were no extravagant ornaments, no gold trim, only simplicity and serenity emanating from the small space. Yet that was precisely what made it feel majestic. Xi Jinping touched the exterior stone wall of the tomb. His hand paused for a long time on the Arabic inscription that his team had translated earlier. In his heart, he began to wonder, why is a prophet so far away? Why is the tomb of a prophet known in Islam found in China, so rich in the history of Buddhism and Confucianism? These questions lingered in his mind throughout the journey home. He didn't make any immediate decisions, no commands, no overreactions. He remained silent, with a faraway gaze, as if his thoughts were wandering deeper than the tomb's location. However, one thing was certain: his heart was troubled. This was no ordinary archaeological discovery. There was something greater than ancient stones and carvings. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new journey, both for him and for the future of Muslims in China. That evening, for the first time, Xi Jinping summoned non-religious spiritual advisors and interfaith experts to his office. There was no discussion of politics, nor of economics. He asked just one simple, yet profound question: what do you know about the Prophet Zulkifli? The question stunned everyone present, but they realized that this was not the time. Theorizing, it was time to delve deeper. The next day after the secret visit, Xi Jinping seemed different than usual. In his private office, he began reading additional reports prepared by a multinational research team. Some of them came from Al-Azhar University in Egypt, which explained that the Prophet Zulkifli was one of the prophets mentioned in the Quran as a patient, devout, and trustworthy figure. This explanation made him reflect deeper. He began to understand that this discovery was not just about history, but also about the universal human values, patience, sincerity, and peace that he had been seeking in his policies and life. Some Middle Eastern experts stated that the Prophet Zulkifli once lived in the Syrian region. However, many others believed that he had traveled far to the east. This opened up the possibility that the tomb discovered in China could indeed belong to the Prophet Zulkifli. Xi Jinping viewed this not merely from a historical or religious perspective, but from a humanitarian perspective. He realized that if the person buried there was indeed a prophet, revered by over 1 billion Muslims worldwide, then this discovery was not just China's, but a shared heritage of humanity. Secretly, he ordered that the tomb be lightly renovated, not to alter it, but to safeguard and preserve it. Without much ceremony, he also ordered the construction of a better access route to the site, clean restroom facilities for foreign visitors, and a simple, unobtrusive security system. He didn't want the site to become just another tourist attraction, not for business purposes, but to honor history and spirituality. A few weeks later, word of the tomb's discovery began to spread abroad. Although there was no official statement from the Chinese government, the news spread quickly through academic networks, the international Muslim community, and independent media. However, independent media and historians widely discussed it. Early photos from inside the tomb chamber leaked online. Arabic symbols on the wooden coffin, stone structures resembling Middle Eastern architectural styles, and the body's tilt to the west. All pointed to one startling conclusion. Across Muslim countries, news of this spread quickly. In Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Egypt, and even Turkey, religious scholars began discussing this discovery in various Islamic forums. Many held special studies on the Prophet Zulkifli. The Prophet's name, previously rarely discussed, was now everywhere. Many Muslims were moved to come to China to witness the site believed to be his tomb. Xi Jinping watched this development calmly. He saw the surge of Muslim desire to honor the tomb as natural. Rather than being alarmed, he was moved. He began to see another side of Islam, not just as a religion, but as an inner force that moves its followers to connect with the prophets, even from great distances. One moment that truly moved him was when he received a report about a group of Muslims from Ningxia and Gansu provinces who had traveled overland for several days just to see the tomb in person. Bringing simple provisions and undertaking a long journey, they came not for tourism, but to honor their beloved prophet. They didn't make a fuss, didn't bring any paraphernalia. They just came with clean clothes, small prayer rugs, and tears. They stood before the tomb, praying in Arabic they didn't fully understand, but it felt full of meaning. Seeing this, Xi Jinping began to understand that Islam wasn't a threat, as he sometimes heard in international political narratives. He saw for himself that Muslims could be very peaceful, very polite, and deeply respectful of the land they considered sacred. He also began to rethink his approach to the Muslim minority within the country. For the first time, he spoke openly to his inner circle. In an internal meeting, he said in a serious but calm tone, "If this is truly the tomb of their prophet, then we should give them space to honor him. We are not maintaining a historical barrier, but preserving the heritage of humanity." This statement shocked his aides. However, gradually the policy direction began to change. The Ministry of Culture was asked to reorganize its approach to the tomb. Instead of closing it, it began to be opened on a limited basis to Muslim pilgrims, with a queuing system and strict time limits. But beyond the issue of graves, there's another issue that continues to capture Xi Jinping's attention: the growing number of Chinese people converting to Islam in secret. According to a report by the National Bureau of Statistics, the number of young converts has increased in the past 5 years, especially in major cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chengdu. They don't publicly proclaim their conversion, but Muslim community activities are growing rapidly, marked by the proliferation of Quranic study classes, charity activities, and a culture of mutual assistance among Muslims who don't even know each other. Xi Jinping didn't respond to this with concern. Instead, he felt a sense of curiosity. He began asking his advisors, what exactly are the teachings of Islam? He wanted to understand why people who were new to it could feel such an immediate sense of peace. One of his advisors who had studied abroad suggested, start by reading a Chinese translation of the Quran. He agreed. That night, he brought home a small book containing a translation of the Quran. He didn't read it straight from the beginning, but instead opened the pages at random. One of the first verses he read was, "And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to all the worlds." Quran, Al-Anbiya 107. Xi Jinping stopped reading. He stared at the page for a long time. The verse seemed simple, yet profound. He began to sense that there were great values in Islam, not to destroy civilization, but to build it. Slowly, he began to see Islam not from a political perspective, but from a spiritual and humanitarian perspective. From that night on, his heart began to lean, not toward any particular religion, but toward the truth he could experience for himself. He couldn't read the Quran in Arabic, but he felt as if a new light was beginning to shine upon his mind. In the following days, the atmosphere around the Great Wall area, where the tomb was found, began to change. Security officers were instructed to be friendly yet firm. Several semi-permanent tents were erected, not for tourism purposes, but as resting and prayer areas for Muslim pilgrims coming from all over China. Xi Jinping continued to monitor the situation through daily reports from special staff assigned to oversee developments at the tomb site. Although he no longer visited the site in person, his curiosity only grew. He began reading more articles, research reports, and even testimonies from Muslim visitors who were deeply moved by the tomb of Prophet Zulkifli. Meanwhile, international media began covering this phenomenon. Several news outlets from the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and even Europe reported the discovery of the Prophet's tomb in China as a very rare event. This was not only due to its unexpected location, but also because of the Chinese government's relatively positive response to the reaction of Muslims worldwide. Xi Jinping then held a closed-door meeting with several interfaith figures known for their moderate and peaceful views. He listened attentively to explanations from local clerics, people who had previously been virtually unheard of at the national level. One of them stated that in Islam, honoring the prophets is not only an obligation for Muslims, but also a form of respect for human history. This statement left a lasting impression on him. He realized that this was the first time he had truly heard the views of Islam from its own followers, not from intelligence reports or political analysis. A crucial decision was made. Xi Jinping ordered an open meeting on interfaith dialogue, with a primary focus on discussing the history of the prophets and the contributions of major religions to peace. He wanted the discussion about the Prophet Zulkifli to be shared not only by the Muslim community but also accessible to all, including Chinese people still unfamiliar with religion. This move surprised many. Some who were usually skeptical of religiously tinged policies began to show support. They saw that Xi Jinping's move was driven not by external political pressure, but by a growing personal conviction. Meanwhile, Muslim leaders from abroad began sending official letters to the Chinese government, expressing appreciation for its good treatment of Muslim pilgrims. Letters from the Grand Mufti of Egypt, the chairman of the Indonesian Ulama Council, MUI, and even from several European Muslim communities reached Xi Jinping's desk. He read them all calmly and instructed that all replies be written in polite and open language. However, what touched Xi Jinping most was a short video report sent by a documentation team from the field. The video showed a Muslim man from Xinjiang province who had come with his family. He stood in front of the tomb, his voice faltering, expressing gratitude for being able to visit such a sacred place. At the end of the video, the man said, "Thank you to our country for paving the way for us to love the prophets." Xi Jinping watched the video more than once. For him, that simple sentence held profound meaning. He felt appreciated, not because of his position, but because he was seen as providing a space for his people to find spiritual peace. That night, he again opened the Mandarin translation of the Quran. He didn't read in sequence, but let his eyes select pages at random. This time, he read a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah. "And we will certainly test you with something of fear, hunger, and a loss of wealth, lives, and fruits, and give good news to the patient." Surah Al-Baqarah 155. He reflected. He knew that his country had gone through many trials. He himself, as a leader, felt pressure from within and without. Yet somehow this verse gave him a new kind of strength, believing that trials were not the end, but rather part of the journey toward goodness. In the following days, Xi Jinping became increasingly active in organizing a special team to plan large-scale events. He proposed a bold idea: holding a religious study group or knowledge gathering in an open area near the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli. Not as a state religious ritual, but as a form of respect for history. This plan initially confused many high-ranking officials. They feared it would arouse negative perceptions from other countries, especially those sensitive to religious issues. However, Xi Jinping made it clear in an internal meeting that this event was purely intended to honor the historical heritage of humanity, not as a form of political support for any religion. He stated firmly, "If we can honor the philosophy of Confucius, why not the prophets? This is not about my faith or yours. This is about humanity." These words resonated with many of his staff. They began formulating the technical plans. The perfect time was chosen: spring, when the air is not too cold and the weather tends to be sunny. The venue was expanded with large tents and sterile areas for comfortable use. Official invitations began to be sent out to various Muslim countries, including Muslim communities within the country. Several prominent religious leaders from abroad also expressed their willingness to attend. Xi Jinping had no intention of being the center of attention at the event. He simply wanted to stand among world leaders, listen, and see for himself how Islam can bring peace. Spring arrived earlier than expected. The sky above the Great Wall was clear and the wind was calm. The area where the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli was found had been transformed into a neat open space, with safety fences and a dedicated path for visitors. A large tent had been erected, complete with loudspeakers and translation screens. In several corners, there were ablution facilities and clean prayer areas. Preparations for the large-scale religious study event were proceeding smoothly. High-ranking Chinese officials were becoming accustomed to collaborating with Islamic figures, both domestic and international. They no longer felt awkward when having to organize an event that included Quran recitations, lectures by religious scholars, and communal prayer sessions. Everything was proceeding as planned. Xi Jinping received daily reports. He did not want this event to be just another ceremony. He asked the committee to ensure one thing, that the Muslims who came felt respected, not just welcome. We are not just allowing them to come, we are welcoming them as special guests, he said. The day arrived. Thousands of Muslims from various countries began to arrive. There were people from Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and even European and African countries. They came in diverse attire, but all shared the same expression: awe and joy. The atmosphere at the venue was very orderly. Local Muslim volunteers worked hard to serve the guests with smiles. The Chinese government officials also appeared relaxed and friendly. There was no tension. There was only a warm and respectful atmosphere. Xi Jinping arrived without much of a flashy escort. He sat in the back row, wearing a simple suit. He didn't want the cameras focused solely on him. He wanted to witness firsthand how Muslims from around the world were united in a peaceful atmosphere, right here in China. The event began with a recitation of the Quran. An Egyptian reciter recited the holy verses in a beautiful, soothing voice. The Mandarin translation was displayed on a giant screen. Many Chinese attendees joined in, slowly reading the meaning. Most of them admitted that this was the first time they had heard such a recitation live. Afterward, a cleric from Central Asia took the podium. He explained the story of the Prophet Zulkifli, a prophet known for his patience and commitment to the truth. He mentioned that in Islamic history, the Prophet Zulkifli was a figure who never neglected his worship and always upheld his trust, never becoming angry or despairing. This explanation drew many nods of admiration. Xi Jinping noted several important points in his small book. He felt that the story of the Prophet Zulkifli held universal values that could be applied by anyone, regardless of religion or background. After the lecture, the event continued with a collective prayer. The atmosphere suddenly became very quiet. Thousands of people bowed their heads. They raised their hands, begging for forgiveness, peace, and salvation for the world. Xi Jinping did not join in the prayer, but he bowed his head as a sign of respect. After the main event concluded, the attendees were led to the tomb. They walked in small, orderly groups and quietly. Each person was given a few minutes to stand in front of the tomb, reflecting or praying according to their beliefs. One of the most touching moments occurred when a young child from Syria, who had come with his mother, stood in front of the grave, crying softly. He said it was the first time in his life he had felt safe and at peace. Amidst the crowds of people from various countries, his cries were recorded by an international media outlet and subsequently went viral on various platforms. The child's words were simple but touching. There is no war here. There is only love here. The video reached Xi Jinping that evening. He played it repeatedly, then paused for a long time. He said nothing, but his face showed a rare emotion. He realized that this event was more than just about history. It was the starting point of something much greater. After the event, many clerics and leaders of the global Muslim community expressed their high appreciation for the Chinese government. They said that not many countries could hold an event of this magnitude without significant obstacles. Some even proposed that such recitations be made an annual event, involving more of the international community. They want to make the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli a pilgrimage site open to all Muslims, rather than a closed place accessible only to a select few. Xi Jinping didn't directly address the proposal, but he seemed to be keeping the idea in mind. For him, this isn't about political expediency or image building. It's about opening a new chapter between the Chinese government and the global Muslim community. Days after the massive Islamic study event around the Great Wall of China, global attention has yet to wane. International media are still discussing how the Chinese government, under Xi Jinping's leadership, has provided an extraordinary space for Muslims to practice their religious practices openly and peacefully. Many are calling the event an unprecedented historic moment in a land traditionally known for its strict religious practices. In Beijing, the atmosphere in government offices is also noticeably different. Some officials have begun discussing the possibility of building an official Islamic study center near the site of the Prophet Zulkifli's tomb. Several Muslim architects from abroad have even submitted preliminary designs for buildings that would serve not only as a center for knowledge, but also as a venue for interfaith discussion. Xi Jinping is listening attentively to all these ideas. He hasn't made a final decision yet, but he has assigned a special team to review all the submitted plans. He has given only one firm directive: don't rush, but don't delay either. If this is good for society and the world, we must act. Meanwhile, the number of Chinese people interested in Islam has increased dramatically. Books about Islam have begun to be printed in Mandarin. Digital Mandarin Quran apps have suddenly become popular downloads. Several online learning platforms have even recorded a surge in introductory Islamic and Arabic language courses. One striking sight occurred in Lanzhou City. A large mosque previously visited only by local residents was now filled with new visitors. They were not only Muslims, but also Han Chinese who came to study, ask questions, and even simply observe the congregational prayer. The mosque's imam said that they now hold introductory Islamic classes 3 times a week, and all the seats are always full. Xi Jinping received this report every morning. He felt something he had never imagined. He saw for himself that Islam came not with violence, but with serenity, knowledge, and sincerity. He felt that this belief did not threaten his country, but rather brought a calming wind of change. One evening, Xi sat on the balcony of his official residence. He gazed at the clear Beijing sky while reading several pages of a translation of the Quran that he kept on his desk. He could not yet read Arabic, but he felt calm as he read the meaning. He read slowly a verse that read, "And we have not sent you, Muhammad, but as a mercy to all the worlds." He closed his book and paused. In his mind, he asked, how is it possible that a book that has always felt foreign contains such powerful messages of kindness and compassion? He didn't answer the question verbally, but kept it in his heart. The next day, he summoned his protocol team and ordered that the tomb complex of Prophet Zulkifli be permanently open to the public with adequate facilities. He also requested that a free learning center be established near the site, open to anyone wishing to understand the history of the prophets, especially the Prophet Zulkifli. This decision drew widespread praise. Religious leaders from various countries sent letters of thanks. Several Islamic countries even offered to collaborate by sending teachers and interpreters so that the Chinese people could learn about Islam directly from credible sources. Xi Jinping welcomed all these agreements openly. He even established a special agency to organize visits between countries for interfaith exchange programs. He wanted China to be known not only as an economically developed nation, but also as a nation that fosters spiritual and moral values. Sometime later, Xi attended a small event held by the local Muslim community in San City. At the event, he sat with young Muslims, listened to their stories, and even ensured that the food served was halal. He smiled when a small child greeted him kindly and said, "We are glad that you protect us." It was a simple statement, yet it left a lasting impression. Xi Jinping is neither a memorizer nor a religious scholar. However, he realized one important thing. His presence now had profound meaning for millions of Muslims, not only in China, but throughout the world. He began to organize a state agenda that was more open to religious dialogue. He granted permission for several universities to establish faculties of Islamic studies. He even planned to hold an international conference on Islamic civilization and its contribution to the world. featuring Muslim scholars from various countries. Of course, his decision was not universally greeted with praise. Some considered it too bold. Yet Xi remained steadfast. He knew the world was changing, and he wanted his country to be part of that positive change. For Muslims living in China, this was more than just a policy change. It was a new hope. They no longer felt wary or oppressed. Now they could walk the streets confidently, carrying their identity without fear of being ostracized. Meanwhile, the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli is now one of the most visited sites in China. Not only Muslims come, but also students, academics, and general tourists. Everyone who visits brings back stories and leaves with a memorable experience. The changes taking place in China following the discovery of the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli have continued apace. Within a few months, the area around the Great Wall, once sparsely visited, has become a center for pilgrimage and spiritual historical study. Local vendors have begun selling books on Islamic history. Translators are working hard to translate Islamic literature into Mandarin, and the local government is providing support in the form of adequate infrastructure and public facilities. Xi Jinping, who initially focused solely on maintaining national stability, is now beginning to see his people become more open to religious understanding, especially Islam. This is not because he wants to change the country's identity, but because he has seen the positive impact firsthand. Crime has decreased in several cities experiencing growing Muslim communities, and residents have become more active in social activities and helping each other. One interesting report comes from Chengdu. A history teacher noted that after his students were introduced to the story of the Prophet Zulkifli and the history of the prophets in Islam, they became more interested in moral and ethical values. Many of them began discussing honesty, responsibility, and peace. The teacher wrote in his report, "They are not only learning history, they are also learning to become better human beings." Xi read the report thoughtfully. He realized that this gentle spiritual approach yielded far deeper results than mere economic and security approaches. He then summoned several of his cultural advisors and said, "Perhaps it's time we facilitate all faiths so that the younger generation can grow up learning without prejudice." From that meeting, the idea was born to create cross-cultural and interfaith synchronization in several experimental schools. Not all regions immediately implemented it, but the program became a pilot project reported by international media. Observers called this a revolutionary step in a global climate still rife with religious tensions. Meanwhile, Muslims from abroad began arriving, not only to make pilgrimages to the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli, but also to witness firsthand the changes taking place in China. Many expressed surprise and admiration. Several well-known Muslim influencers from the Middle East, Africa, and even Europe shared their experiences on social media, showing how Xi Jinping warmly welcomed them and how the local government provided all the necessary facilities for worship. The videos went viral, and positive comments poured in. The Muslim world began to view China in a new light. Previously skeptical, many now expressed hope that cooperation between countries in the fields of religion and culture could be strengthened. Xi Jinping responded by establishing a cultural diplomacy team specifically to organize visits and Islamic cultural exchanges with China. However, not everyone agreed with this move. Some conservative figures within the country began to speak out, worrying that openness to Islam could open the door to foreign ideologies that could destabilize the country. Nevertheless, Xi remained calm. He explained in a closed-door meeting that his actions were not to favor one religion over another, but to provide a space for justice for all. Our country is big. We cannot only be strong economically. We must also be strong in morals and hearts, Xi said at the meeting. Xi's firm stance made many officials, who were initially hesitant, eventually support him. Even several important figures in the party began to take an interest in studying the basic teachings of Islam, at least so they could understand what attracted the people to it. One day, JINPING visited the tomb of Prophet Zulkifli again. This time, his visit was more private. He came without media cameras, accompanied only by a few guards and a Quran translator. He didn't say much. He just sat for a few minutes in front of the tomb, silently contemplating. Before leaving, he spoke briefly to the site guard. "Protect this place well. This is not only part of Islamic history, but also part of human history. The next day, SH instructed that the tomb complex be designated a National Historical Heritage Site. He also approved the construction of an Islamic learning center managed by the local Muslim community, but still under government coordination to ensure quality and security. This move was a strong signal that China was not only granting permission, but also officially supporting the development of Islamic knowledge, not for propaganda, but for education and openness. And this was welcomed very positively by Muslim figures worldwide. Even the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, in his statement, he stated that President JINPing's actions demonstrated the courage of a peace-loving leader. Several Islamic universities even invited representatives from China for dialogue and study. Significant change does not happen overnight, but with consistent, step-by-step steps, Xi Jinping began to move China toward a more open, peaceful, and friendly world toward Islam. He did not claim to be a follower of the religion, but his love for Islamic values was enough to inspire millions. That day, the weather in Beijing was slightly overcast, but the atmosphere in the People's Palace was warm. Xi Jinping had just received a report from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about a surge in Muslim tourists visiting China, which was interesting not only in number, but also in their diverse nationalities, from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. All came not only for tourism, but also out of curiosity about the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli and the phenomenon of increasing tolerance in China. Tebeki stared at the report for a long time. He knew this wasn't just about visitor numbers. It was a signal that the world was paying attention to his country in a new light. Not just as an economic giant, but also as a nation learning to embrace diversity with open arms. Since he opened access for pilgrimages to the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli and provided space for the Muslim community to thrive, global attention has begun to turn to Beijing. He realized that the Islamic world now viewed him in a positive light. This prompted him to think more deeply. What if this momentum were well maintained and directed toward building broader connections between nations? He held a meeting with senior diplomatic advisors and proposed a simple but ambitious idea: to invite world Islamic figures to China for an interfaith peace forum. He didn't want a rigid, formal forum, but an open dialogue discussing a shared future, global peace, and spiritual connections between nations. Initially, there were concerns. Some advisors questioned the impact it would have on bilateral relations with countries less friendly to Islam. But SH calmly replied, "I don't want to create religious blocks. I want to show that China can be a bridge of understanding." Preparations began. The government worked closely with China's Muslim communities, particularly those from Ningxia, Xinjiang, and Yunnan. They were asked to host a cultural event called the World Spiritual Heritage and Civilization Forum. The main venue, of course, was the tomb complex of the Prophet Zulkifli near the Great Wall, which has now been renovated while maintaining its simplicity and historical significance. News of the forum spread quickly. Prominent Islamic figures such as scholars from Egypt, Turkey, Morocco, and even representatives from Muslim communities in Europe and America registered to attend. Many were amazed and surprised that the invitation came directly from the President of China. Xi Jinping personally oversaw the preparations. She wanted to ensure that the Muslim guests felt respected and valued. This included providing halal food, prayer facilities, and comfortable accommodations. Everything had to be appropriate. They were special guests. "Show that we are sincere," he emphasized to the protocol staff. 1 week before the event, an interesting incident occurred. Xi asked his staff to bring a Mandarin version of the Quran that he had heard was widely printed. He held the book calmly, then opened page by page. Although he could not read it with Tartil, he read the meaning in Mandarin slowly. In front of him were no cameras. Only a few staff members were faithfully taking notes. After finishing reading a page, he said, "This is not a book for Muslims only. This is a book full of noble values. I can feel it." Those words became an informal but inspiring statement. One of the staff members present then posted the statement on his personal blog. The post went viral and was read by millions of people in China within 2 days. Many previously hesitant citizens began to open their hearts to Islam, not out of stigma, but out of curiosity. The day of the forum arrived. Muslim leaders from around the world arrived in their best attire. Some wore long white robes, others wore traditional clothing from their respective countries. But all came with one intention: to engage in dialogue and to be grateful for the extraordinary welcome from the Chinese government. Xi Jinping opened the event with a short speech. He didn't use excessive religious jargon. He simply stated that humanity should learn from history and the values of goodness, regardless of origin or religion. He also acknowledged that Islamic civilization is an important part of world history and deserves respect. The Muslim leaders responded to his speech with prolonged applause, not only for his words, but also for his sincerity. One cleric from Pakistan even shed tears when he saw how the Chinese flag and Islamic symbols stood side by side without the slightest tension. The event was a huge success. Over 2 days, more than 15 discussions were held covering topics such as ethics and leadership, minority protection, interfaith education, and the history of Islam in East Asia. Many were surprised to learn that Islam has been present in China for over 1,000 years. After the forum concluded, Jinping returned to his office with a serene smile. He knew this was not the end, but the beginning of something great. He had no ambition to become an icon of the Islamic world, but he was proud to have demonstrated that Islam and China could coexist peacefully and even enrich each other. After the success of the Interfaith Peace Forum, the atmosphere within China began to change. Many people, especially the younger generation, are interested in learning more about Islam. This isn't due to pressure, but rather a natural curiosity. Local social media platforms like Weibo and Douyi are filled with content discussing Islam, the Prophet Zul, and the experiences of visitors to the tomb. Jinping is paying close attention to this trend. He held special meetings with regional leaders and the Ministry of Education. He doesn't want the public to simply follow trends without understanding the context. Therefore, he instructed the creation of neutral, historically based educational materials for distribution in schools and universities. "I don't want fanaticism. I want understanding," he emphasized at the meeting. The materials were not an invitation to embrace a particular religion, but rather an introduction to the history of Islam in China, its contribution to local culture, and how Muslims in the past lived side by side with other communities. Reference books that had previously been stored in specialized university libraries were also being repackaged in the form of documentaries, infographics, and short videos. One of the most viral videos featured a Chinese student visiting the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli with his family. In the video, the student showed the atmosphere of the tomb complex, prayers recited by Muslim visitors, and recounted his experience eating halal food from vendors. He concluded the video with a simple sentence: "I don't know much about Islam, but I know that they really value peace." The video was viewed more than 10 million times in 2 days. Many positive comments emerged, even from people who had previously been uninterested in religious issues. They felt there was something unique and peaceful in the way Islam was practiced there, especially from visitors who came from various countries. Seeing the growing enthusiasm, Jinping gave the green light to make the tomb complex a religious site. Zulkifli designated the site as one of the country's official spiritual destinations. He also ordered improvements to road access, public facilities, and information centers around the tomb. However, he left one important message: maintain simplicity. This is no ordinary tourist spot. It's a place for reflection. This policy was welcomed by local residents. Many of those who used to be street vendors around the site are now receiving training in spiritual tourism services. They learn how to interact with Muslim visitors, from polite greetings and providing ablution facilities to maintaining the cleanliness and comfort of the pilgrimage area. The local government also opened a multilingual information center equipped with guides who speak Arabic, English, and Malay. The changes taking place in the area around the tomb have also begun to ripple outward. Several Muslim communities in major cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chengdu hold open discussions and cultural bazaars attended by the public. They showcase Arabic calligraphy, traditional Chinese Muslim clothing, and halal food, previously only known to a limited audience. Xi Jinping monitors all of this from afar. He doesn't speak much publicly about Islam, but his policies are slowly changing the face of tolerance in his country. He also regularly receives reports from the Religious Affairs Council regarding the development of the Muslim community. It wasn't to monitor, but to ensure that they could grow in an atmosphere of peace and mutual respect. In the midst of this busyness, he received an invitation from a group of Islamic scholars who wanted to hold a large-scale religious study in front of the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli. They wanted to pray for world peace and express their gratitude for the openness shown by the Chinese government. SH didn't answer immediately, but he summoned several of his advisors. "Will this cause an international uproar?" he asked. One of the advisors replied calmly, "No, Mr. President. The world will see this as a real symbol of tolerance." After some thought, SH agreed. He even requested that the government provide logistical support, security, and cleanliness during the event. He emphasized that there should be no disturbance to the visitors. "We don't just give permission, we must show that we protect them." Preparations began. Invitations were sent to various Muslim groups. Hundreds of Islamic scholars from the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe expressed their readiness to attend, not just for pilgrimage, but also to give sermons and pray together. Several famous Muslim artists also joined in, reciting poetry and singing religious songs in various languages. The long-awaited moment finally arrived. The area around the tomb was filled with thousands of people. The participants sat orderly on long mats spread out early in the morning. Some brought prayer rugs, while others simply sat cross-legged with their arms crossed. The atmosphere was silent and solemn. Xi Jinping was not present in person, but he sent a special envoy who read a letter from him. In the letter, he wrote that he was honored that China could host an event that carried a message of peace. He also hoped that this spirit of mutual understanding and respect would spread to other countries around the world. The recitation was peaceful and moving. There were no political speeches, no provocations. There were only prayers, recitations of holy verses, and messages of brotherhood. Many participants shed tears, especially when an elderly cleric from Syria prayed for the rekindling of peace on earth from China. After the successful recitation of the Great Recitation in front of the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli, the world began to pay attention to China in a different light. Many international media outlets reported the event as a historic moment in the relationship between power and spirituality. Even some Western media outlets, usually critical of Xi Jinping's policies, responded positively this time. But for him, global attention wasn't his primary concern. He was more interested in the tangible changes taking place within his country. Every week, he received reports from a special team formed to monitor societal developments. After the event, data after data showed a growing public interest in Islam. Not in the form of fleeting euphoria, but rather a calm and gradual process of learning. One particularly impressive aspect was the report of the high demand for books on Islamic history and Mandarin translations of the Quran. Many bookstores in major cities ran out of stock within days. Some publishers were even overwhelmed with reprints. Surprisingly, the majority of buyers were non-Muslims, wanting to learn more not because they wanted to convert, but because they were curious and wanted to understand, not to remain silent. He invited a group of Chinese Muslim scholars to the presidential palace. They included academics, writers, university professors, and several renowned mosque imams in the country. In the closed-door meeting, he sat without the usual tight security. He appeared more relaxed and inquisitive. "Tell me about it," he said. "What exactly makes Islam so appealing to my people today?" A professor who has also memorized the Quran calmly answered. "Because Islam offers balance. It not only regulates worship, but also shapes character. And Chinese people are beginning to realize that in Islam there are values like hard work, honesty, and compassion that align with our culture." She nodded slowly. She then asked about Quranic interpretation, the meaning of prayer, and even how Muslims organize their social lives. The session lasted 2 full hours. There was no script, no spokesperson, just an open, inquisitive discussion. Before they left, she stood up and said, "I don't know how to read the Quran, But I can feel that people who read this book become more peaceful. If that's true, then I want my people to have the same opportunity. This leveling off became a topic of conversation within the Chinese community. Many officials were surprised, as Xi was usually cautious about speaking about religion. But they knew it wasn't just rhetoric. She was serious. A few weeks later, the central government issued a new policy allowing the opening of Islamic study centers at 5 state universities. This was an unprecedented policy. These study centers were not intended to spread religion, but purely for scientific research, cultural studies, and spiritual diplomacy. Students from various backgrounds were welcome to apply. Shortly afterward, the project to build a gallery of Islamic history in China, to be built not far from the tomb of the Prophet Zulkifli, was also approved. This gallery would showcase the history of Islam in China, the contributions of local Muslim figures, ancient manuscripts, and the interaction between Islam and Chinese culture over hundreds of years. The central government engaged Muslim architects from Uzbekistan, Malaysia, and Morocco to collaborate with the local team. The project was enthusiastically received, even by academics and foreign tourists. For them, this was not a publicity stunt, but rather a subtle yet impactful form of cultural diplomacy. Meanwhile, Islamic discussion communities, led by young people, emerged on social media. They discussed not politics, but rather the values of life. Topics such as the meaning of patience in Islam, the relationship between morality and work ethics, or how Muslims interpret sustenance became topics of discussion, delivered in a relaxed yet inspiring style.